Welcome to Three Siblings, a podcast about life after loss and grief. We're the three siblings, your hosts, Sunny, Tina, and Michelle. On this show, we retell our stories to shine a light on tough family situations to help our listeners with issues they may be facing. Let's get into it.
Hey guys, this is Tina. This is my point of view episode. There were a lot of moments that led up to my mom and dad's divorce. They were both insanely busy, with my mom running the company and then my dad joining later. They still made a lot of time to be very good, supportive parents. Like, they made it to all of Sunny's sports games and stuff. And anytime I wanted to pursue a new hobby or anytime I had like a school event, they were also there for me as well. But at a certain point, I guess when it was really bad was when my dad moved out and moved in with his girlfriend at the time before my parents' divorce was official. So that's when it got really, really bad. And that's when he started filing the papers for divorce. So when their divorce was finalized, they decided that my dad would keep the company and my mom would keep the house. And at that point, I had graduated and gone off to college, and my brother was in high school still, but he only had a couple years left at home as well. So my mom had a lot more time on her hands. And I feel like that's when the start of how lonely she was began. She had a boyfriend for a while, but I feel like having him as a boyfriend didn't really help how lonely she felt, because I guess the Chinese community still kind of highly frowned upon divorce at the time, and she wasn't really able to speak about her mental health as much. Though we kind of knew for a while that her depression was getting pretty bad. So her first suicide attempt was kind of a blur to me, but I remember that the cops stopped her before jumping, and she went to the mental hospital for a couple days, and we were able to visit her there, and she just looked very sad and, almost apologetic. And we were all very scared and just promising her that everything was going to be okay. And then from that point to her second attempt, there were a lot of very positive moments where she was very happy, like family vacations and stuff with her. And you could just see that the road to depression is not linear, that even after like a suicide attempt, obviously people can change. So I did see moments where she seemed a lot better. She took us to Hawaii, and that was super fun. And just like other little trips, like she would come visit me in college in Savannah. And yeah, it seemed like she was fine for a while. And then I graduated and I came home for a while. And then her second attempt was when I had like gone off to work. At this point, I had graduated and I went back to work for my parents in Houston, or I guess for my dad at this point. And it was just kind of like a temporary job after I spent a couple months backpacking. I was at work, and I guess I can't remember exactly how I found out, but I found out that my mom jumped off a building and that I needed to go to the hospital right away. So I guess coming home from work that day, I went to the hospital, and then I guess those moments were kind of a blur as well. We just spent weeks and weeks in the hospital waiting for her to open her eyes again, and she was obviously in a lot of pain, but on a lot of medication, so I guess not really feeling the pain that much. But she just felt very regretful and very happy to see us when she finally did open her eyes and stuff. And at that moment, all of us were able to tell her just how much we loved her and how much we wanted to be there for her. And she, promised like she would never attempt anything like this again. And she was super, super grateful to have another chance at life. And she actually spent a couple of months in, like, she got out of the ICU and then she went to, like, kind of like an in-between, like, hospital and normal living, like, assisted living quarters where we would go visit her. And then finally, we were able to take her home. And at this point, she was still in a wheelchair. But when we finally took her home, my dad was able to get someone to help her. So she, like, moved in. And we moved out of our family home around this, I think while my mom was in the hospital, we moved into another home. Like, while we were going through all this, we had to pack up our family home to go to this new house, which was a lot. But I moved into this new home with her, and I just spent time, like, taking care of her for the next couple of months. And kind of just seeing just like the ups and downs every day of, hoping that she would get better. But I realized that like there was a light in her that was just dimming day by day, and that she was more and more reluctant to do things, and that she just like, there were days where she didn't even want to get out of bed and stuff. So it was definitely really difficult seeing her like that, because I just look back at what a smart and just excited about the world of a person she was. She loved hanging out with her friends. She loved singing. She loved dancing. She loved yoga. She loved to host like little potluck dinners with her friends and play poker with her friends on the weekends. So, like, all this time, I just, never forget just like what kind of person she was. So it is kind of shocking to see the difference. And when you see someone with depression, it's like night and day. So I think I tried to, wake her up and take her to go watch a movie or something just to get her out of the house. And I remember like one thing that we really did like to do together is like we would either walk around the neighborhood or we would drive to like a pretty park and walk around. And that's something that I did get to enjoy with her in her final moments, is that we did go walk around the park a lot, and sometimes we'd bring our dogs. But yeah, like at those times, like sometimes we would fight and it was very unfortunate, but it's kind of hard being with someone 24/7 who is just not wanting to say yes to anything that's kind of like pessimistic and stuff. It's kind of crazy because my brother, sister, and I were all home, even though he lived in Austin, and I think my sister lived in Portland at the time. But we were all home the night before she finally killed herself. And she actually told us the day before that she wanted to. And we were all shocked, and we were just like, no, you can't do this. And we said that we really wanted to take her to go see like a professional to like try to get some more help. And she really was not happy with that. And the house that we ended up moving to was across the street from her best friend. So that night I walked over to her best friend's house and I told her what was going on. I was like, hey, my mom said that she's thinking about hurting herself again. And so that night she made me like this giant porridge to take over. So she was like, you guys don't have to worry about eating breakfast and stuff for the next like 2 or 3 days. Just take this to your mom and we'll figure it out. And yeah, so we just went to bed, and then the next morning, super, super early, we hear a knock, and it was that neighbor who said, hey, like, your mom's car is in there. I think it's super weird. And we're like, oh, that is really weird. So we called the police, and they normally don't do like a missing person report unless it's been over 24 hours. But I think since we told them about her suicidal past, that they were able to make an exception. And then within a couple hours, we heard news that they had found her body. And yeah, so that was hard. And might I mention this timeline is all over the place, but this is just how I'm remembering things. But my dad had passed away just 8 months prior from a heart attack. And so we were basically grieving both of our parents at the same time. I'm trying to remember it as it comes because it is like, it's so traumatic that it's very, very hazy. Like maybe it's a good thing that it's hazy. Maybe what I've heard from a lot of people who have experienced this kind of grief or like dealt with suicide is that a lot of these memories are very fuzzy. And I think that's our body trying to help like numb these like super, super traumatic memories. So anyway, yeah, those last couple of months with my mom were really hard. And my siblings constantly say, especially my little brother, he's always like, oh, I wish I could have been there. You know, I wish I could have taken a semester off after mom's like first attempt. And I always say that, you know, there's nothing that you could have done and that someone who wants to commit suicide is just going to do it. I think we were lucky to even get like another year with her and just like have those moments that we had extra time to tell her that we like loved her and stuff. So it's kind of like we did get closure with her, which I know a lot of people who have obviously dealt with suicide don't get that opportunity, even though it's not the way that we wanted. And there's nothing that we could do to, you know, I mean, I'm not saying that I don't have guilt because I constantly think like, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that. But I was only 24 at the time. I wasn't a mental health professional. And I think that at the time we did the best that we could. You know, I mean, I wasn't technically a child, but I was still very immature, and I'm 30 now and I'm still immature, but I think I did the best that a 24-year-old could have done. And I think Sunny did the best a 19-year-old could have done. And however old my sister was, 27. So yeah, that was my point of view. And we'll talk about it more in the podcast later. That was just kind of like my fuzzy timeline of what had happened. So also, I feel like I didn't talk a lot about my dad's death, but I think we'll touch more on that later. It's kind of hard to just like jump from, I'm kind of thinking about like my mom's suicide now, and it's kind of hard to jump from traumatic experience to traumatic experience. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning in to The Three Siblings. We know we discuss some really tough topics on the show, so we want to make sure you've got the resources you need if you're going through a tough time. Dialing 988 will bring you to a suicide and crisis phone line. If you want to support the work we're doing on the show, the best thing to do is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It might help someone else who needs to hear this and find this show. You can also follow us on social media at Three Siblings Podcast on Instagram and at Siblings Podcast on Twitter. We are so excited to share more stories with you in our next episode.